For 3,000 years, the Galactic Concord had shared stories about a species that existed only in whispers and old data files. They called them the Earthlings, the impossible ones. Every species in the galaxy knew the tailies, but nobody believed them anymore. They were just stories, the kind of scary tailies that parents told their children to make them behave. The stories said these creatures came from a planet so dangerous that it should have killed them 1,000 times over. A world with crushing gravity that would flatten most species. A world where the temperature could swing from burning hot to freezing cold in a single day. A world filled with a poisonous gas called oxygen that would burn the lungs of any sensible creature. A world crawling with predators in every forest, every ocean, every desert. But the most terrifying stories were about the humans themselves. They said humans were endurance hunters who could chase their prey for days without stopping to rest. They said humans would break their own bones and simply wait for them to heal back together. They said humans bonded with wild predators and turned them into loyal pets. They said humans consumed poison for fun and set themselves on fire just to cook their food. Ambassador N of the Dominion loved to use humans as a joke during diplomatic meetings. Whenever negotiations got difficult, he would click his mandibles in laughter and say, "Perhaps we should summon the legendary humans to settle this dispute." Everyone would laugh nervously and move on. It was funny because everyone knew humans were not real. The Galactic Concord had mapped almost the entire galaxy. They had found and cataloged over 4 million intelligent species across countless star systems. They had explored every corner of known space. They had never found Earth. They had never met a single human. The old records mentioned coordinates, but those coordinates led to empty space, a dark void between spiral arms where no star could possibly support life. Most scientists believed they had made up the whole thing. The civilization had died out 2,000 years ago, and nobody really knew what they had been like. Maybe they had enjoyed telling scary stories. Maybe humans were just their version of a monster under the bed. But Commander did not believe that. Was a serving on the conquered science vessel eternal question. She had spent 40 years of her life searching for evidence that humans were real. Her scales had turned from bright green to dull gray during those decades of searching. Her colleagues thought she was wasting her time. Her superiors had nearly canceled her research funding a dozen times. She had become a joke in scientific circles, the brilliant researcher who threw away her career chasing ghosts. Did not care what they thought. She had studied the records more carefully than anyone else. She had noticed something that everyone had missed. They were an incredibly advanced species. They had technology that the modern Concord still did not fully understand. They would not have made a simple mistake with coordinates. Unless it was not a mistake at all. They had not recorded where Earth was. They had recorded where Earth would be in 3,000 years. They had calculated the movement of stars over time, something called stellar drift, and adjusted their coordinates to match. They had left a message for the future, for whoever was smart enough to figure it out. Had spent 15 years doing the math. She had checked her calculations 1,000 times, and finally, she had convinced her captain to take the eternal question to the corrected coordinates. The journey took 6 months, barely slept during that time. She spent every night staring at star charts, wondering if she had made a mistake somewhere. Wondering if she would arrive at empty space and prove that she really had wasted her entire career on nothing. When the ship finally dropped out of hyperspace, was standing on the observation deck. Her hearts were beating so fast she thought they might burst. Her scales had turned pale white with anxiety. Then she saw it. A small yellow star, warm and steady, sitting exactly where her calculations said it would be. 8 planets orbiting around it in neat circles, and the third planet from the star was the most beautiful thing had ever seen. It was blue and green and brown, covered in swirling white clouds. Her instruments detected water, vast oceans of it covering most of the surface. They detected land masses covered in forests and grasslands and mountains capped with snow. They detected an atmosphere filled with that deadly oxygen gas. And they detected something else. Radio signals. Thousands of them, maybe millions, filling every frequency with noise and chatter. Satellite networks circling the planet. Energy signatures coming from the surface and from stations in orbit. Someone lived there, someone with technology. His hands were shaking so badly she could barely operate her console. She ran every scan she could think of. She checked and double-checked the results. She made sure she was not dreaming or hallucinating or going crazy from decades of obsessive searching. The results were the same every time. She had found Earth. The humans were real. Opened a communication channel to Concord High Command. Her voice came out as barely a whisper, but the words she spoke would change the galaxy forever. This is Commander of the Eternal Question. I have found Earth. I repeat, I have found Earth. The humans are real and they are here. The response from High Command took several minutes to arrive due to the vast distance. When it came, could hear the shock in the communication officer's voice. They did not believe her at first. They demanded proof. They asked if she was feeling well. They suggested that maybe she needed rest. Sent them the sensor data. She sent them the images of the blue planet. She sent them the recordings of the radio signals. She sent them everything. The channel went silent for a long time. Then a different voice came through, older and more serious. It was Fleet Admiral, one of the highest-ranking officers in the conquered military. "Commander," he said slowly, "do not approach the planet. Do not attempt communication. Do not do anything until we arrive. Do you understand? The humans were not just a legend. They were a warning, and we need to be very, very careful about what we do next." Looked at the blue planet hanging in the darkness of space. Somewhere down there, on that beautiful and deadly world, the most terrifying species in galactic history was going about its daily life. They did not know that they had just been discovered. They did not know that everything was about to change. She wondered if the Conquered was ready to meet the monsters from the old stories. She wondered if anyone could ever be ready for that. The Conquered fleet arrived at Earth 3 weeks after its discovery. 40 warships hung in the darkness beyond the moon, their weapons ready but not aimed at anything. Admiral had given strict orders. No aggressive actions, no threatening movements, just watch and wait. Nobody knew what to expect. The old stories painted humans as savage monsters, but the sensor readings showed a civilization that had satellites and space stations and ships traveling between planets in their own solar system. Savage monsters did not build things like that. Spent those 3 weeks studying everything her instruments could detect. She learned that humans had colonized their moon and the red planet they called Mars. She learned that they had mining operations in the asteroid belt. She learned that their technology was strange, different from conquered designs in ways she did not fully understand. She also learned that they knew the conquered fleet was there. Human satellites had spotted them within hours of their arrival. Radio chatter increased dramatically. Ships changed their courses. Something was happening down on Earth and could only guess what it was. On the 18th day, the humans made contact. A small ship approached the conquered fleet. It was not a warship. It was barely armed at all, just a simple transport vessel with a white hull and markings that translation software identified as diplomatic symbols. The ship broadcast a message on every frequency. "Galactic Conquered Fleet, this is the Earth Vessel Messenger. We come in peace and wish to establish communication. Please respond." The message was in perfect Conquered standard, the common language used by all species in the galaxy. This should have been impossible. Humans had been isolated from the rest of the galaxy for their entire existence. They should not know a single word of any alien language. Admiral responded carefully. "Earth vessel, this is Admiral of the Galactic Conquered. We receive your message. How do you speak our language?" The reply came quickly. "Admiral, We have been listening to your transmissions for approximately 600 years. We have had time to learn. Felt her scales shift to a dark blue color that indicated deep unease. 600 years. The humans had known about the conquered for 600 years. They had been listening, learning, preparing, and they had chosen to remain hidden until now. What else had they been doing during all that time? The first meeting took place aboard a Conquered station hastily constructed in neutral space between Earth and the fleet. Was chosen to lead the scientific delegation. She had found the humans, so it seemed fitting that she would be the first to meet them face to face. She was not prepared for what she saw. The human delegation consisted of 5 individuals. They were smaller than had expected, shorter than most conquered species, with soft skin in various shades of brown and pink. They had hair on their heads in different colors. They walked upright on 2 legs and had 2 arms with 5-fingered hands. They looked fragile. They looked harmless. They looked nothing like the monsters from the old stories, but knew better than to trust appearances. Her scientific training told her that this was a species that had evolved on a. Every part of them was designed for survival in conditions that would kill almost any other creature in the galaxy. The lead human was a woman named Laura. She had dark skin and gray hair cut very short. Her eyes were warm and friendly, but there was something behind that warmth, something old and patient and calculating. When she smiled, had to fight the urge to step backward. "Commander," Laura said, her voice soft and pleasant, "thank you for finding us. We have been waiting a very long time for someone to solve the puzzle the left behind." "You knew about the coordinates?" asked. "We found their probe 200 years ago. It was drifting in our outer solar system, damaged but still functional. We learned a great deal from it." Laura tilted her head slightly. "They were very afraid of us. Their records described humanity as the most dangerous species they had ever encountered. We were curious about that. We wanted to understand why." "And did you?" Laura's smile faded just a little. "Yes, we did." She explained everything over the next several hours. Humans had discovered the probe and used it to learn about the wider galaxy. They had decoded conquered transmissions and studied alien technology. They had built their own versions of faster-than-light drives, translation devices, and advanced weapons. They had done all of this in secret, hiding from a galaxy that thought they were just a scary story. "Why hide?" asked. "Why not reveal yourselves centuries ago?" Laura looked at the other humans in her delegation. A tall man with red hair named, who served as their military advisor. A younger woman named Sophie Grant who handled technical matters. 2 others who remained silent, watching everything with careful eyes. "We were afraid," Laura admitted. "Not of the conquered, of what the conquered might do if they knew we existed. The old stories about us are not entirely wrong, Commander. Humans are dangerous. We know this about ourselves. We have spent our entire history fighting and killing each other. We were not sure the galaxy was ready for us." "What changed?" Laura stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, stars glittered in the endless darkness. The collective changed everything. Felt her blood turn cold at the mention of that name. They were the conquered's greatest enemy, a hive-mind species that consumed other civilizations and absorbed them into their collective consciousness. They had been slowly conquering the outer regions of the galaxy for centuries. Nothing seemed to stop them. "We have been monitoring them for a long time," Laura continued. "They are heading toward conquered space. At their current rate of expansion, they will reach your core worlds within 50 years. Your defenses will not hold. Your fleets will be destroyed. Your species will be consumed, one by one, until nothing remains." "We are aware of the threat," said stiffly. "The conquered is managing the situation." Laura turned to face her, and all the warmth was gone from her eyes. What remained was something hard and cold and utterly terrifying. "Commander, you are not managing anything. You are losing, slowly, steadily, inevitably. They have destroyed over 200 species in the last 1,000 years. You have not won a single major battle against them. You are retreating, and you cannot retreat forever." The words hit like a physical blow. She wanted to argue, but she could not. Everything Laura said was true. The conquered had been losing ground to them for generations. Everyone knew it, even if nobody wanted to admit it out loud. "What do you want?" asked quietly. Laura walked back to the table and sat down across from her. The warmth returned to her eyes, but now understood what it meant. It was the warmth of a predator who had decided not to eat you. Yet. "We want to help," Laura said. "Humanity is offering an alliance. Your technology and resources combined with our unique capabilities. Together, we might be able to stop them. Apart, we will both eventually fall to them." "And what do you want in return?" "A seat at the table, recognition as a member species of the conquered, the right to exist alongside everyone else." Laura paused. "We do not want to conquer anyone, Commander. We just want to survive, and we would prefer to do it without having to watch the rest of the galaxy burn first." Looked at the humans sitting across from her. They looked so small, so fragile, so harmless. But she remembered the stories. She remembered what they had written about this species. They do not stop. They do not give up. They will keep coming until they win or until they are all dead. Do not fight them unless you have no other choice. The conquered had a choice now. They could reject the humans and face the alone, or they could accept the alliance and unleash the monsters on their enemies. Did not know which option was more frightening. The Galactic Conquered Assembly met in emergency session for the first time in 300 years. Representatives from over 1,000 species filled the Great Chamber on Station Prime, their voices rising in a chaos of clicks and whistles and hums. Everyone had an opinion about the humans. Nobody could agree on what to do about them. Ambassador N stood at the center of the chamber, his mandibles clicking rapidly as he demanded attention. "This is madness," he declared. "We cannot ally ourselves with these creatures. The stories exist for a reason. They warned us about humans before their civilization fell. Perhaps the humans were the ones who destroyed them." A ripple of worried murmuring spread through the assembly. It was a theory that several species had already suggested in private. They had been powerful, far more advanced than the modern conquered. Something had wiped them out completely. Could it have been the humans? High Counselor Tal raised her staff for silence. She was old, even by the standards of her long-lived species, and her body was frail. But her mind remained sharp, and her voice carried the weight of centuries of wisdom. "We will hear from the human delegation before making accusations," she said firmly. "They have come a long way to speak with us. We owe them that courtesy at least." Laura walked to the central platform with the same calm confidence she had shown at every meeting. Followed behind her, his military uniform crisp and his expression unreadable. They looked small against the vastness of the chamber, surrounded by creatures of every shape and size imaginable. But they did not look afraid. "Honored members of the conquered," Laura began, "we understand your concerns. We know the stories you tell about us. Many of those stories are based in truth. Humans are capable of great violence. We have fought terrible wars against each other throughout our history. We have created weapons that could destroy entire cities in the blink of an eye. We have done things that we are not proud of." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But we are also capable of great kindness, great creativity, great love. We form bonds with each other that last a lifetime. We protect our families with everything we have. We build, we create, we dream of better futures. The stories you tell only show one side of us. They show the monster. They do not show the gardener, the artist, the parent holding their child." A delegate rose, her bioluminescent patches flickering with distress. "The records say your species once used atomic weapons against your own kind. Surely even you cannot justify such horror." Stepped forward to answer this question. His voice was steady, but there was pain in his eyes that he did not try to hide. "Yes, During a conflict we call World War II, we developed nuclear weapons. We used them twice to end a war that had already killed tens of millions of people. The cities we destroyed held hundreds of thousands of civilians. He took a deep breath. It was the worst thing we have ever done. Many of us believe it was necessary to end an even worse conflict. Others believe we should have found another way. We still debate it to this day. You admit to mass murder and expect us to trust you, N demanded. We admit to our past because hiding it would be dishonest, replied. Every species in this room has dark chapters in their history. We are not unique in that. What makes us different is that we learned from our mistakes. We have not used nuclear weapons in combat for over 300 years. We built international systems to prevent such conflicts from happening again. We are not perfect, but we are trying to be better. The debate continued for hours. Species that had never agreed on anything found themselves united in their fear of humans. Others argued that the threat was more immediate and more dangerous. Some suggested that perhaps the two threats could be aimed at each other. Finally, a small delegate from a species called the Rose to speak. They were tiny, barely reaching waist height on most species, with large eyes and delicate limbs. They were considered one of the weakest species in the conquered, often overlooked in important decisions. I have a question for the humans, the delegate said in a soft voice. Not about your weapons or your wars. I want to know about your pets. Laura blinked in surprise. Our pets. The stories say you bond with predators. You take wild animals that should eat you and make them your companions. Is this true? Yes, Laura said slowly. We have been domesticating animals for thousands of years. Dogs, cats, horses, many others. They live with us in our homes. We consider them members of our families. Why? Laura thought about the question for a long moment. Because we are lonely, I think. Humans need connection. We need to love and be loved. When we found animals that would accept our affection, we gave them everything we had. We changed them, yes, but they changed us too. They made us gentler, more patient, more capable of caring for creatures different from ourselves. The delegate nodded slowly. My species is small and weak. We have survived in the conquered because we are useful, because we cause no trouble, because larger species do not see us as threats or prizes. But we are always afraid. We know that if they come, we will be among the first to fall. We have no weapons, no ships, no soldiers. He looked up at Laura with his large, dark eyes. If we accept this alliance, will you protect us? Not because we can help you win, but simply because we need protection. The chamber fell silent. It was the question that nobody else had thought to ask. Not what humans could do for the strong, but what they would do for the weak. Laura knelt down so she was at eye level with the small delegate. When she spoke, her voice was gentle in a way that surprised everyone watching. They would be under our protection from the moment the alliance is signed, not because of what you can offer us, because protecting those who cannot protect themselves is what good people do. It is what we should have been doing all along. She stood and addressed the full assembly. Humanity does not seek to conquer or dominate. We are not here to replace thee as the galaxy's nightmare. We are here because we believe that life, all life, deserves a chance to exist in peace. They want to consume everything. We want to preserve it. That is the difference between us and them. High Counselor Tao called for a vote. The process took 3 days as each species deliberated with their home governments. The debates were fierce. Old enemies found themselves on the same side. Old allies disagreed for the first time in centuries. In the end, the vote was close, closer than anyone had expected. The Galactic Conquered agreed to accept humanity as an allied species. Human military forces would be integrated into conquered defenses. Human technology would be shared with those who wanted it. And when they came, humanity would be standing on the front lines. As she left the assembly chamber, found herself walking beside the delegate. He looked up at her with those large eyes and said something she would never forget. I think we just made the best decision in our history, or the worst one. I suppose we will find out soon enough. Could not argue with that logic. The galaxy had just invited the monsters from its oldest nightmares to come inside. Whether they would be saviors or destroyers remained to be seen. But somewhere in the darkness between stars, the collective continued its endless march toward conquered space. And for the first time in 1,000 years, something was waiting for them. Something that did not know how to give up. Something human. The assault on Horizon's Edge came 18 months after the Alliance was formed. Intelligence reports had predicted an attack, but nobody expected the scale of what emerged from hyperspace that day. 300 appeared in the system like a swarm of locusts descending on a harvest field. Each ship was a living creature, grown rather than built, packed with millions of drone soldiers ready to consume everything in their path. They ranged in size from small attack vessels to massive hive ships that were larger than moons. Their organic hulls pulsed with sickly green light as they moved toward the planet. Horizon's Edge was home to 12 billion civilians from 7 different species. It was one of the most important agricultural worlds in the Conquered, producing food for hundreds of other planets. If it fell, billions more would starve in the months that followed. The Conquered defensive fleet numbered 80 ships. They had been reinforced with 40 human vessels over the past year, bringing the total to 120. It was not enough. Everyone knew it was not enough. The numbers were simply too uneven. Admiral Marsh stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force ship Relentless. It was humanity's and most powerful warship, built specifically for this kind of fight. Was a compact man with gray hair at his temples and eyes that had seen too many battles. He had been a soldier for 30 years, and he knew what impossible odds looked like. These odds were impossible. Commander stood beside him as the Conquered liaison officer. Her scales had turned pale gray, the color of fear, but her voice remained steady as she reported on the enemy formation. "They are deploying in standard swarm pattern," she said. "Our tactical models predict we will be overwhelmed within 4 hours, perhaps less." Smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Your models are based on Conquered tactics. We are not going to fight like the Conquered." "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, opened a channel to the human fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Marsh. Execute Battle Plan Omega. I repeat, execute Battle Plan Omega. Show them what we are made of." The human ships surged forward. They did not form defensive lines like the Conquered vessels. They did not try to hold position and absorb the enemy attack. Instead, they accelerated directly into the formation at speeds that should have been suicide. Watched in horror as 3 human destroyers dove toward a hive ship 10 times their size. "What are they doing? They will be torn apart." Watch said calmly. The destroyers released their weapons at point-blank range, so close that the explosion should have destroyed them along with their target. Then they executed turns so sharp and sudden that could not understand how the crews survived. The ships twisted away from the blast zone while the hive ship erupted in a chain reaction of secondary explosions. "How did they know where to hit it?" breathed. "We have been studying for a long time," replied. "We found their weak points, their nerve clusters, their fuel organs, their control nodes. Hit them in the right spots and even the biggest ship will fall." The battle raged across the entire system. Human ships moved through the swarm like wolves among sheep, striking hard and then vanishing before the enemy could respond. They took damage that would have destroyed Conquered vessels, but somehow they kept fighting. Crews worked through injuries that should have been incapacitating. Engineers performed repairs under impossible conditions. Pilots pushed themselves past limits that should have killed them. 4 hours passed, then 8, then 12. They kept coming, their numbers still overwhelming, but something was different now. They were not advancing as quickly as before. Their formation had become chaotic, disrupted by human attacks that came from unexpected directions. Their command ships were falling one by one, leaving the drones confused and disorganized. And then the humans did something that no species in galactic history had ever attempted. Captain Grace commanded the Marine Company aboard the assault ship Fury. She was a tall woman with dark hair and scars on her face from battles that would have killed anyone else. When the order came through, she did not hesitate for even a second. All Marines prepare for boarding action. We are taking the enemy flagship. Her soldiers loaded into boarding craft, 100 Marines armed with weapons designed for close combat. They launched toward the largest hive ship in the entire fleet, a massive creature that served as the command center for the entire swarm. No species had ever boarded a ship. The idea was considered insane. The interior of a hive ship was a nightmare of organic tunnels filled with acid and drones and things that nobody wanted to think about. Going inside meant almost certain death. Grace went inside anyway. The boarding craft punched through the hive ship's outer hull and deployed the Marines into a corridor that looked like the inside of a living creature. The walls pulsed with sickly light. The floor was soft and organic beneath their boots. The air was thick with spores that would have killed an unprotected person in minutes. Human armor protected them from the environment. Human weapons cut through the drones that swarmed toward them. Human determination kept them moving forward when every instinct screamed at them to turn back. They fought through corridor after corridor, room after room. Drones came at them in endless waves and the Marines cut them down. Traps tried to stop them and the Marines pushed through. The hive ship itself seemed to be trying to digest them, walls closing in and acid dripping from above, but the Marines would not stop. Grace lost 63 of her 100 soldiers before they reached the central node. She lost 12 more holding the position, while the demolition team planted charges on the massive nerve cluster that controlled the entire ship. Explosions echoed through the organic tunnels. The ship shuddered and screamed in a way that sounded almost alive. Grace was the last Marine standing when the charges were ready. Her armor was cracked. Her weapons were almost empty. She had a piece of metal stuck through her left arm that she had not bothered to remove because stopping would have meant dying. She activated the detonator and spoke into her communicator. Her voice broadcast across every frequency so that both sides could hear. Humanity sends its regards. The central node exploded. The hive ship died, and with it went the coordination that held the swarm together. They began attacking each other, confused by the loss of their command structure. The battle turned from a desperate defense into a complete rout. The surviving human and conquered ships pushed forward, destroying vessels that no longer knew how to fight back. 217 enemy were destroyed before the rest fled into hyperspace, retreating for the first time in recorded history. The Allied fleet lost 42 ships. 31 of them were human. Over 8,000 human sailors and soldiers died defending a planet that most of them had never even visited. But Horizon's Edge survived. 12 billion people would live to see another day. The advance had been stopped for the first time in 1,000 years. When the news reached the Galactic Concord, nobody quite knew how to react. The humans had done the impossible. They had turned certain defeat into overwhelming victory. They had sacrificed themselves for species they barely knew, fighting and dying alongside people who had feared them just months before. The old stories had called humans monsters, but monsters did not die protecting strangers. Monsters did not sacrifice themselves for worlds they had no reason to care about. Maybe the old stories had been wrong about a lot of things. The war against the lasted 7 more years after the Battle of Horizon's Edge. It was brutal and costly, with victories and defeats on both sides. Planets fell and were liberated. Fleets clashed in the darkness between stars. Millions of soldiers from hundreds of species fought and died across 1,000 battlefields. But something had changed. They had learned to fear. Before the humans arrived, the collective had never retreated. They consumed everything in their path, absorbing species after species into their hive mind. Resistance only delayed the inevitable. Nothing stopped them permanently. Now they hesitated. They avoided systems where human ships had been spotted. They from battles that were not going perfectly in their favor. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered something that could hurt them badly enough to matter. The humans earned many names during those years. The soldiers, the persistent hunters, the ones who do not break. Stories spread through the conquered about their impossible resilience, their refusal to surrender, their willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. A human pilot named Danny Carter flew his damaged ship into a dreadnought, destroying both in a flash of nuclear fire. A medical team led by Dr. Rachel Monroe worked for 3 days straight without sleep to save wounded soldiers from 7 different species. An engineer named Tony held a breached bulkhead closed with his bare hands while his escaped, dying from decompression, but saving 12 lives. These stories spread from system to system, told in 1,000 different languages. The humans had become heroes, the warriors the galaxy had never known it needed. But it was not just their fighting that changed how people saw them. It was the small things that happened between battles. Human soldiers adopted alien orphans whose parents had been killed by the human doctors invented new treatments for diseases that had plagued other species for centuries. Human engineers helped rebuild cities that had been devastated by war, working alongside the local populations as equals rather than saviors. The delegate who had asked about pets in that long-ago assembly meeting kept his people safe throughout the entire war. Not one world fell to the. Not one civilian was consumed. The humans had promised to protect those who could not protect themselves, and they had kept that promise. When the war finally ended, it was not with a dramatic final battle. The collective simply stopped expanding. They to their original territory behind a line of human-designed defensive stations. They remained there, watching, waiting, remembering what it had cost them to fight against the impossible species. The Galactic Concord held a celebration that lasted for weeks. Representatives from every allied species gathered on Station Prime to honor the victors and mourn the fallen. Monuments were raised on 100 worlds, bearing the names of those who had given their lives. Ambassador Laura, now old and gray but still sharp as ever, addressed the assembly one final time. She moved slowly, leaning on a cane, but her voice remained strong and clear. When we first revealed ourselves to you, many of you were afraid. You had heard the stories. You knew what humans were capable of. You thought we were monsters. She paused, looking around at the thousands of delegates watching her. That fear was not unreasonable. Humans are dangerous, we always have been. But we learned something important during this war. We learned that our dangerous nature can be pointed at the right targets. We can be terrible enemies, yes, but we can also be loyal friends. We can be fierce protectors. We can be the shield that guards those who cannot guard themselves. High Counselor Tal, who had led the Conquered through the darkest years of the war, rose to respond. She was ancient now, older than almost anyone in the chamber, and her voice cracked with emotion as she spoke. For 3,000 years, we told stories about humans to frighten our children. We made you into monsters because we could not imagine that something so terrifying could also be good. We were wrong. She walked slowly across the chamber until she stood face to face with Laura. You are terrifying. You are also brave and loyal and compassionate and kind. You are everything the legends said and nothing the legends warned us about. The Galactic Conquered is honored to call humanity not just allies but friends. The chamber erupted in applause. 1,000 species expressed their joy in 1,000 different ways. Clicks and whistles and hums and roars all blended together into something that sounded almost like music. Laura stood at the center of it all, tears running down her weathered face. She thought about all the humans who had fought and died to reach this moment. Grace and her Marines, the crews of the ships lost at horizon's edge, the countless soldiers and scientists and diplomats who had worked for years to prove that humanity could be trusted. They had done it. They had taken humanity from myth to reality, from feared legend to trusted partner. They had shown the galaxy that the species was capable of more than destruction. In the years that followed, humans spread across the stars alongside their new allies. They built colonies on worlds that no other species could survive. They explored the unknown reaches of the galaxy, always pushing further, always searching for new wonders. They became teachers and students, warriors and peacemakers, builders of a future that once seemed impossible. The old stories about humans did not disappear. They were still told around fires and in quiet rooms, tales of the impossible creatures from the deadly world. But now those stories had new endings. They no longer spoke only of monsters. They spoke of heroes. They spoke of the day the legends became real, and the galaxy discovered that sometimes the scariest thing in the darkness is not your enemy. Sometimes it is your friend. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of human space, a memorial stood on a small moon orbiting Earth. It bore the names of every human who had died during the war, from the first battle to the last. At the base of the memorial, carved in stone that would last for eternity, were words that captured everything humanity had become. We came from a world that tried to kill us every day. We survived because we never gave up. We saved a galaxy because we could not bear to watch it burn. We are human. This is what we do. Visitors from across the galaxy came to read those words and understand the species that had once been only a legend. They stood in the shadow of the memorial and felt something they had not expected to feel. Not fear. Gratitude. The humans had shown them that monsters could become protectors, that terror could become hope, that the scariest stories sometimes have the happiest endings. And in the vast darkness between the stars, that hope burned brighter than any sun. It was human. It was unstoppable. It was beautiful.